there, it's Danny here from our humble home. In today's video I'm going to be talking a little bit about lightening timber, the timber furniture that I actually buy to upcycle and to flip. A lot of it is the orange pine sort of furniture, and even once it's been sanded back it's still pretty orange and dark, patchy, that sort of thing. I've used two processes in the past. One has been bleaching, one is the whitewashing, and I will go through and show you some examples of what I've done with each, the pros and cons that I've found with each, and which one that I do and I use now in my upcycles, flips, that sort of thing. So the first process was actually bleaching that I've tried before, and I've tried it a few times. This was the first time on this little, it was an entryway table that I actually did, and it was a sweet little table. It had a very dark stain on it, and I sanded the top. I actually painted the base of it, but that was the color there, that dark color you can see, that was on the top. And the top was just a bit too orangey for me, and it was quite patchy, and I actually wanted to lighten the whole thing and make it look more uniform. In this particular piece I actually put on 4 coats of bleach. The bleach is just a bottle, a $1 something bottle of household bleach that I got from Woolworths. So it was cheap enough to do, and that was one of the advantages actually of doing this. It was very cheap, and it did actually work. But after you've bleached it, I actually wiped it down with water, sort of washed it off. Some people say you have to do it with vinegar. I just did it with water. Also sand this, because I felt that was an actual con of bleaching, was it seemed to traumatize the timber and made the timber extremely rough to touch, and it had to be sanded back, and I felt bad actually. I felt like I'd hurt the timber, but yeah, so that was one of the disadvantages of it, I guess, too. Another disadvantage I think with it is that when you are applying the wax, it does seem to bring out a lot more of the color in the timber, so it's not as light, although it did lighten up a little bit, but it was still a little bit patchy, I think. Another disadvantage I found with this particular one is that probably about a month after I had done it, I noticed that in the middle there, and you can sort of see, and I'll circle it, there was a strip of moisture, and it was quite wet. I put it out into the sun to dry. It did dry out, but when it dried, it lightened that portion of the timber there. You can see it just looks a little bit patchy. I was happy with it, but I wasn't completely happy with the result. Overall it was a gorgeous little piece, and it is still one of my favorite pieces that I've done. So that gave me the idea to actually do this piece, and I'll just explain a little bit what happened with this. It came up really well, but when I wet it, it was very orange, and even looking at it through the camera, it doesn't look as orange as it actually was. So I thought, I don't want it to be orange when I varnish it, so what I'm going to do is bleach it. So I just used full strength household bleach. I put 4 coats on, and the last coat I put out into the sun and let it dry out there, and it came out really well. I was pleased. So it was a massive table, this one. It was my monster coffee table makeover, and it really didn't turn out like I thought it would. The bleaching was actually a big disaster, and in a minute I'll show you why. I was surprised actually, because the first little table I considered that one a success, but this just wasn't. I put it out in the sun, and it did seem to lighten. It actually didn't come up as well as I thought. It was still quite patchy, still quite orange, and I was sort of a little disappointed with it actually. But what I did was I sanded it down, because after you bleach wood you need to sand it because it becomes very rough, and I was really happy with it at this point. Fast forward to the night time
And this happened, I don't know whether it was the moisture in the air because it's been very humid, but it just went wet, like that was actually a puddle of something. And I don't know whether it was the timber's reaction to the bleach or whether it was the actual bleach that hadn't completely dried, but it just looked horrible. So the next morning I went out, it was still the same, but I put it out in the sun. We're actually having really hot heat wave days, so it didn't take long for it to dry, and it came up really nice. I think I might have sanded it again before I actually put on some matte varnish.
So after putting on the matte varnish, it actually made it look even more patchy and worse. And even after this, there was a bit of a process to this piece, but after this I saw that I would never bleach again any furniture, so I had to sort of find a different way of lightening my furniture after this. And I guess the next obvious way of doing that is to whitewash the timber. I always thought whitewashing actually covered the timber up completely, sort of thing, and you could just make out the timber, but it doesn't necessarily. Like if you put a thin coat of white paint, like very watered down, it will actually just make the timber a beautiful white sort of color and lighten it up, which is very coastal at the moment and very fashionable. It just neatens it up, makes it look cleaner and crisp. This was the last makeover I did in the video before this, the ASMR video, and I did make this whitewash very runny. So this was just a little bit of paint and I added water to it. I don't measure it out, I just pour it in and see how it turns out. So you can see that this was the table that I had sanded before I put the whitewash on, and I'm wetting it just so the whitewash doesn't soak in too quickly. But you can see when I do wet it how orange it goes. And so if I'd applied the wax and varnish, I would say that it would have made this timber even more orange than it was dry. So I really didn't want that. So I'm applying the whitewash here, and it is a very washy whitewash. It's very thin, this one, because I really just wanted to lighten the timber. I didn't want to make it white, if that makes sense, or I didn't want it to look like it had been painted. So, you know, a positive of whitewashing, one of the many, is that you have the paint on hand, so you probably don't even have to pay anything to do it. You'll have the paint on hand either from what you've painted at the base, or if you don't have it, it's cheap enough just to get a little sample pot, which was a couple of dollars, and you can keep that for further projects. It's also a faster result than the bleaching. You can sort of see what it's going to look like straight away. You paint it on, you wipe it off. I wipe mine off straight away, like I don't wander off and get a drink or anything while the paint's on. I wipe it off straight away because I don't want it to start drying. If it starts drying, it can get a little bit patchy. That's another reason I like to wet it, make the whitewash runnier too, so I can ensure that it doesn't dry off at all. It's very satisfying doing this. So that on the right hand side is the one I've just whitewashed, and this is the other table that I haven't yet whitewashed, and you can see how it's taken the orange out of it. But I am going to put another coat of whitewash on this, and you can see that even though I'm wetting it down, it's not going orange like it did previously. It's staying a nice white color, so it has changed the color of the timber into a nice white, light, well, not white so much, but lighter, more neutral sort of color timber. And I decided just to do another coat of wash because it was so runny. I thought it will just make it a little bit lighter, and it wouldn't hurt to do it on this. I find the finish with this is absolutely flawless. It's not rough or anything. In saying that, I do give it a ultra light sand with a very fine sanding block, and at Bunnings they sell little sanding blocks. You can get fine, medium and coarse, and they're $1 something each, and they're perfect for this sort of thing, for just making the surface ultra smooth. And I let the paint wash dry, and then I will give it a little sand, and that is in between coats and after the coat, before I actually wash it as well. This is another table. It was a coastal look bedside table that I had actually whitewashed and made over to, and you can see that this is a little bit orangey, and some are worse than others. Like this one isn't too bad. I could have easily waxed this, but it just wasn't the look I was going for, especially being a coastal style table, so I wanted to lighten the timber on here. This wash was a little bit thicker, and I only put one coat of wash on this. I thought that was enough, and again I wiped it off. There is one con, or a couple of little cons. If that was too thick, it might be a bit light, so make sure that you water it down probably a little bit more than you need to. Then you can add extra coats so it's not as too light. And also another thing is, because you are watering it down, paint can splatter onto the base of your piece, so just be careful of that. In my last video it did that, and I did wipe it off, but then before I waxed I noticed there were more little dots and marks on it, so I just quickly painted over that with some of the paint I had left. An advantage also of whitewashing too is when you do go to wax, I haven't varnished whitewash, but when you do go to wax, it doesn't change the color of it. It doesn't make it any darker or yellower, or it might deepen it a tiny bit, but you know, that's all really. This is veneer, and I whitewash veneer, so veneer whitewashes really well. I actually sanded this veneer back, which was a bit of a worry, but it worked out good. And as you can see, it's very orange there, and that doesn't go with the pink. I painted the base, so I actually wanted to whitewash this. I did 2 coats of whitewash and it came up really pretty. As far as bleaching veneer, I mean, I'm just talking of my own experiences. So when I bleached the timber and the actual bleach sunk through, and it seemed to absorb right deep down and then re-emerged at some other point, I don't know whether I would bleach veneer, because if the veneer sucked the bleach in and it went down to the particle board, it could actually bulge and split. So I'm not going to bleach anything again actually, but I definitely wouldn't try to bleach veneer. I'm sure you can, I'm sure other people do, but I wouldn't do it. And that was the result, and I'll just show you some pictures, some results of my whitewashing. So when it comes to lightening my timber, I will definitely whitewash from now on. I'm not going to bleach ever again. There were a few fails there, and also I think it traumatizes the timber too. They're just my thoughts, and I hope you've enjoyed this video today. I'll see you next week. In next week's video, I'm working on some bedside tables, so I'll see you then. Have a great week. Bye for now.